Hello everybody, how y'all doing? How's everybody doing today? Thank you for joining me for another episode of Lostlikemike. As always, I'm your host, Mike Gonzales. Feeling lost as ever, I suppose. It reminds me of that saying, not all who wander are lost. Or maybe it's not everybody sitting in their living room knows where they're at. Yes. I think sometimes I'm way too caught up in research and looking at the little screen on my phone, trying to figure one thing or another out. I think it does damage. Damage is a strong word, but I think that you can get lost, disoriented. Earlier today, I was doing a copyright page for my book, and I was looking at all these examples, and a lot of them were from 2020. And I reference 2020 a lot. I graduated from university in 2020. The pandemic was in 2020. I say 2020 a lot in conversation in terms of those subjects. And anyway, I was so disoriented earlier trying to do this copyright page and trying to figure out to cut and paste these different sections of information, that when I was actually writing the copyright year, I sincerely couldn't remember what year it was. I said 2022 doesn't sound right. Is it 20? And I had to look it up. That's my confession of the day, is that I kept saying to myself, surely you're not going to look it up. You're not. Come on, just. But I was so, and plus, it's been a long day. I worked all day, come home, do things. I've been staring at screens all day, just plugging away at odds and ends, and so admittedly, I'm tired, mentally tired, and but the secret is that a lot of that fear comes from losing my father to Alzheimer's and dementia, and I've mentioned in previous episodes that sometimes I'll psych myself out, and when you forget your car keys where you put them. I mean, I don't do that because I purposely set this thing up at my front door so that I'll never have that feeling. But yeah, so a silly subject like that, like I was doing this one class at my work, and I'm sure everybody wonders if I just work at a place where all I do is take classes, but because I'm always referencing these classes that I'm taking at work. But in one of the classes we were talking, the person was the instructor was saying how when networking, you often find yourself trying to remember the other person's name, and you get introduced to all these people. And have you ever found yourself not remembering when you go around the room and you get to the end, you forgot the first person's name, stuff like that. And all that stuff terrifies me. And so even hearing the instructor saying that that's typical for others, for a lot of people, it kind of made me feel okay for a minute. But when something like that happens and I'm sitting there staring at my little computer screen and I'm dizzy from being tired, the prospect of not remembering what year you're in feels a lot different. I remember the first time that I talked to my father and I realized that it was something more than just forgetfulness. We were in a parking garage. One of those giant parking A and parking B garages for one of the medical centers, one of the hospitals, kind of very large ones that confuse just about everybody, but we parked there to go see. My mother was in the hospital doing some sort of procedure. It was quite some time ago, and it wasn't the center of the story in my mind, but there was a point where we exited the hospital into the parking garage, and it wasn't so much in the words that he said. I don't remember because he almost didn't want to admit that he didn't remember outright where he parked. But I was trying to probe questions to find out if if we could get to the bottom of it, maybe look for clues within what he did remember. But I said, you know what, it's cool. Let me, run up a little bit and run down a little bit, see if I spot the car. But there was a moment where I was looking through the parking garage, and I looked back, and there was this just look of complete lost, a look of complete confusion that seemed to be more than just about where the car was at. And I think I ended up finding the car and everything was fine, but yeah, I sensed that something was very wrong. And it wasn't until much later that we discussed it as a family. And if you know anything about my family, we communication's not our strong suit. At least it had not been. But wow, it's gonna be that kind of episode. I just tangented pretty hard. So a few housekeeping notes. I try not to be nitpicky about listening to previous episodes. I know I point out a thing or two of the dumb things that I say from time and time again. But it's interesting when you're recording these podcasts and you're trying to just free flow and not have every word planned out, that you'll say things that, in retrospect aren't well thought out, and sometimes you say the wrong word for the wrong thing. And for those people that do listen to podcasts all the time, it's par for the course. Everybody does that, especially the freeform podcasts that exist. But sometimes I'll listen back, like my pronunciation of dyslexia on the previous episode, where I tagged myself like 4 times saying it wrong. Well, last episode I did one that bugged me, and so I'm going to make mention of it, but I'm not really going to get too far into it. I said, because I had forgotten to, I incorrectly labeled the episode, so we went 0, 1, 2, 4, and then we went back to 3. And I had said that if you're listening to this chronologically, then you'll get confused, which I suppose is a true statement. But what I meant was, if you listen to these podcasts numerically, 1, 0, 1, 2, 4, 3, then it was going to get confusing. Or if you listen to it 1, 2, 3, 4, since they were out of order, I was referring to things that were happening in episode 4 when I was recording episode 3. See, even talking about it is cringe, so I'm just going to drop it. But anyway, so not chronologically, numerically, which it's silly, but I used to have this thing with a friend of mine where he would recognize that I would hold on to things, and if I didn't get it off my chest and say it, then it would haunt me, and I would bring it up 8 months later. Like, remember when we were having that conversation and you asked me if something was bothering me, and I said no. Well, really, there was something, and blah blah. And I would say the reference in the story, and he would say, "When did that happen?" And I would say, "Well, 8 months ago." And he would be like, just floored by the fact that not only am I referencing something from 8 months ago, but that it still bothers me to the point where it festered and I had to say it out loud 8 months later. So if I don't get these things off my chest, then yeah, it keeps me up at night. Chronologically, numerically. Oh, what an idiot. So thank you for indulging me and allowing me to get that out of my system. Sometimes I'll mention things like that just to satisfy that. Anyway, again, thank you for everybody that does subscribe and does listen to these episodes on the different platforms. If you watch it on YouTube, I appreciate the subscriptions, the likes, and the bell ringing or whatever things that people do in these circumstances. But most of all, I like the email correspondence at lostlikemike@gmail.com, and of course the comments in the comment section, which a lot of times I'm thanking people for the comments, and it's like I do when I'm playing the shows and nobody tips, but I'll thank people for tipping in the future sense of if anyone was so inclined to leave a comment, I'd be more than happy to. I'd be happy that you did. Again, this is the last episode of the shorter variety. Starting next week, it'll go back to being I'll have the full 6-hour upload. And that's a little behind the scenes stuff, but it's a matter of efficiency on my part, learning how to do all this stuff. But thank you for everybody that does listen and share with friends. Or I am interested in doing some marketing. I looked into on Fiverr. Maybe someone will comment regarding the value of using promoters and avenues such as that. Some of it seems legitimate, others don't really, and I don't really have anyone to ask the opinions of. So if anybody is familiar with those types of things, I sure would appreciate that, to comment below. But yeah, if you listen on Google Podcasts, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, I appreciate the the downloads and the likes and the thumbs up and all the different types of things that are offered on the different platforms. So thank you for all that. This week I wanted to start off talking about a family day vacation that I took. Right now I'm doing something 7 days a week. I'm working or, doing different. I'm working 7 days a week. We'll put it that way. So because I lost my job, in May or end of March. Sorry, lost my job in March and got my new job in May, June 1st, really. The prospect of going on a family vacation kind of went down the tubes. We weren't going to do that. So I'm just, so we did like a little day trip to the beach. Just pile the family in the car and head out at the crack of dawn. Spend a couple hours on the beach, jumping in the water, enjoying the sand, the sun, and then rushing back, and then I go on to work or do my project, whatever. So it worked out that time. So we did it. We decided to do a second one, and we went to a theme park, a water park. Now, I am not into theme parks. I do not like theme parks. But in an exercise of doing things not for myself, despite the reputation that I may have of others feeling like the world revolves around me, I sincerely wanted to go to this theme park, this water park, for my little girl, for my wife, for them to enjoy. And but I do not like rides. I don't like it. I once got on a ride. I once got on a ride to prove to myself that I could do it. That it was a fear that I could conquer. Right? Don't like heights. Don't like the lack of control. Don't like being with a metal bar across my stomach and doing loop-de-loops or whatever it is. It's just not my thing, man. But when I would tell people that, they would say, well, have you ever done it? And they would say no. So I decided to go on one. This is many years ago. And it was on the world's largest, and you know what? I should have researched this for this episode if I had planned to say anything about it. But it was, I want to say it was the world's largest wooden roller coaster. Correct me if I'm wrong, listener. But it was the world's largest, the Rattler, a theme park in San Antonio, Texas. I said, I'm going to do it. So correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. And I think it involved religion. I think that I interpret it as a challenge from God. If I remember correctly. It was many, many years ago. Anyway, I just remember getting on this going up the stairs and thinking, too late now, can't stop, can't go down any kind of chicken ramp or something, because I'd probably be equally as terrified of going down a chicken ramp. So, and I remember being on the roller coaster thinking, yeah, absolutely hate this. This is horrible. I don't ever want to do this again, right? But the reason why I bring this up primarily is because my wife had YouTubed a video of a ride at this water theme park. And now, you had to be a certain height to get on this ride, but there were other rides where you had to be taller, meaning that this ride even small children could get on. So understand that I'm hyping this ride like it's the Rattler, but it's, by all standards, this is a very tame water ride, and that involves like a big giant tube that shoots down in all these directions. But she was 100% hyped about this ride. All these other things at this water park she wanted to do, but this ride was like the highlight. And my daughter, she's just barely hits the height requirement, but she was on board and hyped like her mom. And it became like a, hey daddy, is it cool? You're gonna get on with this, right? And I was like, all right, I suppose I will get on this ride with you. Because in my mind, I thought, if the height requirement is so super tiny that my daughter can get on it, it can't be all that bad. So then we arrive at this theme park, which everything about it troubles me, like the amount of money you're spending, the parking, the whole thing just unnerves me. But we'll get into all that. Here we are. She says the first thing we're going to do is hit this ride, because the lines for this, as with all rides, they get incredibly long. You don't want to deal with that later in the day. Let's knock it out first thing. So there I am. We're in line. And then I see the height of this ride. The stairs go up and up and up, and it just seems like it's really high up in the air. Okay. And there's all walks of life on this, in the stairs, just going up and up and up. And I'm thinking, I've already committed. I said I'm going to do this. And we were like some of the first ones, like in the park, even though there was quite a line ahead of us already. It wasn't going to be that incredibly long of a wait to get onto this ride. So we're in this line, and I'm trying to keep a stoic sense of toughness right in front of my daughter. My wife can see right through it. She's like, are you all right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. And you see this big tube, and it's wrapped around everything, right? So you start hearing people, going down this ride, and then we get to a certain height, and then I see this open gap in the tube, in the tunnel or whatever that the tubes are going into, but it's like a tube. So my daughter starts to get a little bit like, why are they screaming, Dad? And so I'm like trying to be cool, and I'm like, well, let's watch them. So when we'd see the people coming through, they'd be screaming, but they were smiling. So I would tell her, it's cool. Look, they're smiling while they're screaming and freaking out the whole way. Like, if they were like crying and like, no, why? Then, okay, we can panic. But they seem to be pretty chill. But what I noticed is that as I'm going higher and higher, I'm having like physiological reactions to the stress of doing this. It was the strangest thing. And maybe this is a culmination of anxiety and panic attacks or different things that have been kind of going on within my body as of late. But by the time I got up to the top of the ride, I am telling you, I was lightheaded, nauseous. I was a wreck, man. Over a ride that you only had to be 36 inches tall to ride, man. And so I said, look, I'm good. I'm okay. I mean, there was children getting on this stupid ride, you have to understand. So I'm watching, there was 2 chutes, and I'm watching them getting fed into this chute, and this one lifeguard lady was grabbing the tube that the people were on and spinning it and spinning it and throwing them into this larger tunnel, like spinning. And I said, she better not touch my tube, man. You know? She better not touch my tube, I told my wife, I said, we don't need that extra song and dance. Just let me go right. I was so stupid. But then I said, listen, I just have one request. Please, for the love of all things, I don't want to go into the tube backwards. I just want to see what's coming forward. And wouldn't you know that right at the last second, my priority was securing my daughter. I wanted to put my leg on top of her legs to ensure that she was nice and secure. And the only way that I could do that at the angle that I was at was to sit down facing away from the entrance. So my back, of course, was facing down into the tube, exactly how I didn't want it to be. But there it was. And poof, we get shot into the tube, into the tunnel. And I'm telling you, I never faced forward the entire trip down. And something told me that if I screamed, I would feel better. But I couldn't, it wouldn't come out right. So it sounded like, meh. And I'm going backwards. And at the very tail, I spit out into the water or whatever. And it's all done. And my daughter's like, that was great. That was fantastic. And I tell you, hours later, I still didn't feel right. I mean, after we did all this other activities, we ended up having, we went to the restaurant within the place and spent entirely too much money for food that just was not worth it, which is, I guess, it's typical to theme park fare. But I was sitting at this bench eating my whatever waffle fries or whatever it was that I had, and thinking to myself, I'll never be able to fly in an airplane, or, you know. And it was weird because a lot of the walk up this ladder, this staircase ladder, a lot of this, it felt like it was like a metaphor for like the fear of the unknown, like the fear of the hype of what it was going to be at the end. Like, it felt like it was a metaphor for life, almost like the anxiety of mortality and the existential crisis of not knowing what's to come. And I know it's kind of weird to flip it into something heavy, but I've thought of it several times since, that feeling of the hype to get there and the stress and anxiety to get there for something that was over in 15 seconds, 20 seconds, you know, whatever. It was so quick to be done. But the line was 15, 20 minutes, you know what I mean, to get to the top. Which is true for a lot of things that we're anxious about. The anticipation is far worse than the actual event. But on one level, I was proud of myself for for just knocking it out and doing what I didn't want to do for the benefit of others. But at the same time, I felt like how ridiculous that was. Anyway, so this theme park, there were several instances where I was just disgusted by the general conduct of people. And I'm not talking about being judgmental of others. You know, I'm not saying I'm judging these folks, but I'm judging their actions. Okay? Like there was these pools, right? And there's way too many people in these pools. And I felt like we're in like this like human soup of just people bobbing in these pools. Kids jumping on where my kid was floating on some tube and just invading our personal space, and that's what kids do. They were having fun, but I just was too weird about it. But there was this path to get to these pools with these lawn chairs sitting up all around. And it was, high noon, right? The sun's beating down. There's shade. There's elements of shade. But there were these all these people just sitting in these chairs and full on eating, having their picnic right there on the chairs, right? And I'm looking around and there's ketchup packets on the ground, trash, And I'd like to get into that a little bit now that I'm thinking about it. I do have an issue with eating. The sounds of eating, the images of eating, it's a sickness. I will admit it. I don't like it. I used to watch people, not in a stalker sense. I used to just happen to notice on my peripheral, I would see somebody preparing their food in either the high school lunchroom or at some dine-in establishment. The typical ways that people prepare their food, and they'll cut their steak and put the steak sauce or they'll be fixing a baked potato, adding the salt and the pepper, the butter, whatever it is. And I would hear this internal voice, this internal this is so good. Look, it's gonna taste fantastic. Look, I'm gonna put some butter on this, and I could use a little salt. This is so yum. This is great. And it would just freak me out, man. I remember this one time this guy was trying to describe to me this packaging for food, and he was saying, oh yeah, you put this part here, you stack this part here, this is where you're going to keep your food and you'll get your thing, and it's just like nom nom nom. And I thought, oh God, even telling that story is making me just furious. Or when you hear somebody go, or would you like some nom 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 nom? Oh, I hate myself. Oh, so bad. But so there I am walking, and there's the heat is rising off the ground, and there's mixed smells of ketchup and sunscreen and chlorine and butthole. I mean, it was just the worst, man. And nobody caring to, not a care in the world, just licking their fingers and shoving that awful food in their mouth and then bumping into me and you know, as I'm trying to get to this overpacked pool that, you know, smells of BO and coconuts. It was ugh. And the whole time I'm thinking, I am paying so much money to be a part of this human soup, and I don't get it. But, you know, my kid liked it. She was all about it. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And look, there was a lot of fun to be had. You know, we did a lot of the water things. And those are the memories, right, that you carry with you, that you take along for the rest of your life. You know, I wonder sometimes if what my parents must have thought about all of the things that we did growing up, like while I was chalking up these lifelong memories, were they secretly complaining about the way people were eating their food, you know? I wonder. That's so funny. I guess there's a couple updates we could do. A parallel to what I was saying about the podcast promotion, you know, utilizing Fiverr or like social media marketing and the different things that are there. I'm all done with the book. The book is done. The children's book that I've been writing and illustrating. I pretty much finished the cover and I received the library block of information. Everything is ready to be submitted. But I was reading about promoting the book prior to releasing it on the different platforms and different, like the Amazon books and the Barnes and Nobles or the different channels of sales, because once you post it for sale, then I guess there's certain algorithms, certain ways that they maintain or push books that are getting the initial sales to larger markets or to more viewings when people are researching books to purchase. And a lot of times authors will be in a rush to put their books out, and when they do, nobody really views them because there's not a lot of traction out the gate. Okay, so my goal is to have a marketing plan prior to releasing the book. So I wanted to release it in September anyway. So part of parallel research that I'm doing with the Fiverr promotions, I'm trying to figure out if it would benefit me to do that as well, promoting for ebook sales and for paperback sales through these channels. And I read some of them, they say like there's organizations or like parents that participate in different groups, forums, whatever, that these people will talk about these books on your behalf, you know, for a minimal fee. But so that's kind of been where it's at with regard to that. But I'm very excited to have, I'm so close to having a tangible book in hand that I've created that I can't even tell you. And thank you for the people that did request to be beta readers. Thank you for that. I'll get you a copy of the book. And some very positive suggestions with regard to the illustration that I popped up on the screen. I'll show the updated one that I made some changes based on the constructive criticism that was received, which I thought was great. Thank you for that. I'm always apprehensive to say people's names. Um, is that weird? I don't think, other than my brother, I didn't even say my brother's name on this podcast. Huh. It's probably some psychological thing on my part, but um, I find some sort of value in protecting people's anonymity. Until I figure it out, I'll maintain that. But yeah, I do sincerely take the especially when I can see the merit of the criticism, or the suggestions, really not criticism. But if I do see the merit in it, I'll review it and maybe make the change. In this case, I did, because I saw it through fresh eyes, which is what I'm really looking for. So thank you. Health wise, I'm gonna be honest. I really have had a hard time with the exercise. I've just been so tired lately, and I know that it would benefit me to do that exercising, and I'm really dreading. I have my stress test scheduled at the end of this month, and I don't want to be like on this treadmill huffing and falling over, and the doctor's like, "Yeah, you're a lot worse than I thought," and I'm no, man. It's just that I'm out of shape. I'm just really out of shape, brother. I'm sorry. Um, so I'm really trying to get on all that, and but I'm just being honest with you. I've had a really hard time, and I am looking for motivation. I'm what more motivation than to salvage, my heart and maintain these obligations. But it's been tough to do that. A little speed round for this episode. Let's see what I have listed down. I did want to mention that I talked in large part about the issues that my daughter has gone through with regarding learning, and I neglected to talk about my son, who's a bit older, but he's struggled with his own issues, and he's had to do a lot to cope with those things. He's very bright, very smart, very proud of him. He's a self-starter. It's funny. He reminds me a lot of my brother, just in how passionate he is, and what a good heart he has. But I was very focused on discussing and obviously saying dyslexia wrong. So, but my son has his issues that he has struggled with, and his are more similar to mine with attention issues, and I never medicated for mine, but I had to develop many coping mechanisms over the years to learn how to focus and to figure out how to rein it in. And even you can hear it in the tangents I take in conversations and the way that I'm sort of in 10 places at once. But I wanted to mention that about my son, that I am very proud of him, and that he also has had his burdens to bear. And I got to thinking about him in addition to that, because I've recently been doing a lot of rationale when I'm thinking about my daughter, and I'll say, should I, I'll tuck her into bed, and I'll get angry if she falls asleep before I get to go in, and she does this thing with holding my finger, or as she falls asleep, and she has this thing where, like, if you pull away a little bit, she'll grab tighter. even when she's really drifting off into sleep. And I'll be saying to myself, she won't always want to hold my finger, so I'm going to do it every time that she wants it to. Or I'll be standing at the doorway, and I always did this thing where I would go out to the car when she'd get home from school or from wherever, and I would take her out of the car seat and carry her inside. And so sometimes when I have the wherewithal to do it, I'll go out to the car, and she's getting so big, but I'll still chunk her on and carry her inside, because I know she won't always want me to do that. But the reason why it hits so hard, or so it carries as much weight as it does, because I've seen it with my son, where he used to love doing a lot of these different things, and he grows up so fast, and where now in looking back, like, I took him trick-or-treating until he was too old to be trick-or-treating, right? Every year it was the one holiday that I could break away from because of custody issues and things, but we would always do Halloween every year together. And when it was finally to the point where he didn't want to do it anymore, it hits a little different when you're seeing the little one and you're thinking, this really won't last forever. It's going to go fast. And so that's what got me thinking about that. When it could, in terms of like doing everything. And one time recently she was saying that there were some older boys at her school telling her how her and her friends were babies because they wanted to play. They were playing on the jungle gyms and, being all of 7 years old, And she was bothered by it and came home and told me about it, that she was... And I remember I told her, be little as long as you can be. Like, stay young as long as you can. Because I said, those boys are just jealous, right? You hear parents say that all the time. But I promise you this, if I could be little, if I could be 7 and pretend on jungle gyms all day, I would do it in a heartbeat. And so would they. You think they want to be cracking wise and trying to out macho each other, like that's fun? Gets old quick, man. I mean, playing tag and make believe is where it's at. And don't let anybody tell you different. I think that's the number one thing with my little girl, is I try to instill into her that creativity, that youthfulness, that dreamer mentality, to revel in it and hang on to it for as long as you can, for the rest of your life, really, man. Don't lose it. It's hard to work that balance of, in that course about creativity, that was something that they said about the way that the school systems work nowadays, whereas for as long as there's been schools, has been to teach you how to follow the rules and teach you how to do things as they are to be done. That's the purpose of school, to instill the knowledge of the way things are and how to do things. And slowly over time, it just squashes whatever creativity and open-mindedness that you had coming into the place. And remembering that creativity, remembering that way of seeing the world in Technicolor is just so valuable. And I think some of it comes from having kids and really just kind of sitting on the ground playing with them, box of colors, markers and paints just everywhere, and being creative and making nonsense art on cardboard boxes and scraps of paper and with glue and glitter and all kind of craziness. All of a sudden you remember that the world's not just spreadsheets and deadlines. It could be all these different beautiful things. Next thing you know, I'm taking photographs of the sky randomly to just see how the colors of the sky kind of mess with the clouds, and finding a little bit of happiness in those moments. Just try to maintain that level of creativity and remember what it's like to be young, for as long as you can for the rest of your life. Just remember what it's like to tap into that. Anyway, guys, I think that's it for me today. Please like and subscribe. Please tell a friend. These are sort of weekly therapy sessions for myself, and I'd love it to be more symbiotic and more two-way street. I'd like to talk about things that you want to hear about, and hear about things that are going on in your life as well. So I will see y'all next week. Take care of yourselves and stay young. Keep dreaming, and I'll see you next week. See you around.